Welcome to my world history notes, where I'm just giving you some thoughts on the Cold War. I thought a lot about the Cold War, but I didn't. And I'm learning a lot of stuff in the past year, especially. And I just want to share it with you. This isn't about making money or about my channel. It's just that this is a way for me to express to other people what I'm learning. And if you find that there's a fact wrong, that maybe I'm reading something wrong, or maybe the source I'm reading from is wrong, let me know. But this is amazing to me. I had no idea about a lot of these things, and this impacts my youth and my early adulthood and some of the lies I believed. And I'm just now finding out by looking at different sources. And with the internet, I can look at dozens of sources to find information and figure out what's true and what's not. So I always talk about a personage first in the Cold War, and that includes the Cold War all the way up through the fall of the Soviet Union, but even beyond that, because we're still impacted by the Cold War, impacted by the struggle against communism, and it's gaining ground in this country very much so. And of course, the communists will tell you it's not, that I'm exaggerating it, because that's what they want you to believe. It's like the burglar doesn't want you to know he's in their house. So I want to talk about somebody today who's very important. There's a financier named George Soros, and there's things about him I didn't know. Very interesting. I'm going to eventually get to him and things that he does later and especially in when the Cold War when the Soviet Union falls. There's some things he does financially, huge things with countries and with Russia in particular, that helps put Russia where it is today, or where it was with the just a few when Putin took over, just a few oligarchs owning most of the wealth, and his iron fist being welcome to deal with what uh, Soros and others caused. But let's talk about George Soros's beginnings. Um, Now, talked about somebody the other day named David Horowitz, who is a leftist, a far leftist, friend of the Black Panthers, who are Marxist communists. And I talked about him and how he had became a conservative. Now, he wrote a book called The Shadow Party that included information about George Soros that I thought was pretty interesting, and he gave his sources so I could check it out, which is very expensive because I keep buying books that people refer to in the bibliography of their books to make sure that they're not misrepresenting. And it's also very fascinating. I really enjoy reading them. But Soros originally was born in Budapest, Hungary, on August 12th, 1930. His name originally was Georgy Swartz. His parents were non-practicing Jews. Now, his father, Tivadar, was a lawyer, and his big passion was promoting Esperanto, which is an artificial language created in the 1880s, trying to wipe out nationalism. The people who were Esperantists wanted everyone to drop their native tongue and speak Esperanto instead. So Tivadar was an expert, a master of Esperanto. Now, when the Nazis occupied Hungary in 1944, Tivadar and his family went into hiding. They took on false identities as Christians, and they survived the Holocaust. Now, George Soros writes that life under Nazi and communist rule shaped his character in unexpected ways. One effect was it made him went against his fellow Jews. He saw how the Hungary's Judenrat, which is a Jewish council that set up by the Nazis, how they betrayed Jews in exchange for privileges. At one point, he was recruited by the Judenrat and other Jewish youngsters to hand out leaflets, deceptively persuading unwitting Jews to turn themselves in for deportation to the death camps. Soros and his father discussed this, and Soros, you know, said he understood what was going to happen to the Jews that he gave these to. And his father confirmed that he should go ahead and pass these out. Later, when his father told him to stop running errands for him, this is all stuff that played into. He cited this incident so many years later as his reason for disliking fellow Jews, because he worked for the Judenrat, and he condemned the collaborators of the Judenrat for their betrayal, but exempted himself from moral judgment because he was only a teenager. Yet boys his age were fighting and dying all over Europe. So this is interesting. I thought um, Soros. I got a quote from Soros in one of his books. Um, he said he was adopted by an official of the Ministry of Agriculture whose job was to take over Jewish properties, and he took possession of large estates, and that was his identity. It was a very strange life. So he did give interviews about this, like on 60 Minutes in 1998. Um, so this is the guy who aspires to be, a quote from him, the conscience of the world. So when the communists occupied Hungary, they presented young Soros with a new set of moral challenges, Horowitz says. Now, he insists today that the communists repelled him, yet he told his father in 1946, I'd like to go to Moscow to find out about communism. I mean, that's where the power is. I'd like to know more about it. So this is this sums up basically Soros's life. That's where the power is. So Soros went to England, and um, in January, of course, 47, Stalin installed a communist dictator in Hungary. So in any event, Soros went to the London School of Economics, and that was a socialist. That's a socialist. I was founded by socialists, like Fabian socialists. Um, but that's something you can look into. So he his change in the world begins around 1980. So we'll come back to him. Um, Now, George Soros is an interesting character. He's done some things that I would say, are pretty bad. The globalists, the communists would say they're pretty good. So, very big difference in philosophy. So, let's go to something that impacts my youth. Well, when I was young, it was very popular, and to be, especially for the nerdy kids, but to be we called Ho Chi Minh Uncle Ho. That was kind of a joke. Many people had Mao's Little Red Book. It was very popular to be a revolutionary, to fight against the establishment, which really meant the U.S. Um, and North Vietnam was visited by Jane Fonda and several other celebrities who praised it immensely. And our war there was unjust, and blah 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 blah. And a lot of things I didn't know. I read some things when I grew up, as an adult, but I learned some things from reading a book about from Jamie Glazer. Um, that some interesting statistics now and people he quoted. So North Vietnam, the Democratic Republic of North Vietnam. Remember, I mentioned Ho Chi Minh declared independence from France in September 1945, and declared the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Now, Communist North Vietnam, like Stalin's Soviet Union, even Castro's Cuba, which we'll get to later, perpetrated the Red Terror on a mass scale. They had purges that eliminated all opposition. Trotskyites, which, for example, they were decimated, and their leader was put to death. There were 50,000 executions in the countryside. John Lewis Margolin, who's an authority on the North Vietnamese Gulag, wrote between 50,000 and 100,000 people were imprisoned. 86% of the members of party cells in the countryside were purged, as were 95% of the cadres in the anti-French resistance. So this is what they do, the communists do. As soon as they take over, then they kill many of their own people, because they don't want any of them who would want to take over from them. They want to get rid of anybody who might be a threat to them. So that's why these bands like what's that band from the 90s, Rage Against the Machine, when communists take over sport, um, you uh, ideologues, you people who promoted them and helped put them in power, they kill you first. So that's the first people that go when communists take over, the people that supported them, because they're a threat to them too. Now, the North Vietnamese regime focused its terror especially on intellectuals, which Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge did later, but we'll get to that. Maybe. Margolin noted in his 1958 alone, there were 476, quote, ideological saboteurs. They had to make public acts of self-criticism, and they either sent to work camps or to the Vietnamese equivalent of the Chinese Lao Gai, camps for re-education through labor. It followed North Vietnam followed its Stalinist and Maoist role models, initiated a program of forced collectivization of agriculture. It was horrifying what they did. With instructions and supervision from Chinese mentors, the North Vietnamese enforced a land reform campaign that put tens of thousands of innocent Vietnamese peasants, exterminated them, just got rid of them. This land reform was a, quote, deliberate and brutal act of mass murder, as so said an American scholar, Stephen Morris. He wrote on the overall nature of North Vietnamese terror. Quote, it was a nation run by a Marxist Leninist vanguard party, monolithic in its internal organization, its secret police, and its insistence on either co opting or murdering all of its political rivals. It was Stalinist in its ambition to control every aspect of society, its intent to destroy all autonomous social forces, and its primitive ideology of a unified communist world. Now, as occurred in every socialist testing ground that shared a border with a free society, a mass exodus ensued. More than 1 million Northerners fled to South Vietnam to escape a monstrous communist regime. Faced with these horrors, believers celebrated the new killing machine all the more eagerly, Glazer says. You had people making pilgrimages from the United States, especially in the mid 60s, to express their devotion to the communist cause. And I'm convinced now from what I'm reading on the left that the main reason that the main reason that, say, a high school kid would be opposed to the Vietnam War was self-preservation. You didn't want to go and be drafted and get killed. But as far as the academics and the main people behind the motivation behind the revolts and the demonstrations and the anti-war protest was simply that I believe, from what I'm reading from the communist point of view, from the leftist point of view, was that because North Vietnam was communist, and so they had to be that was just horrible to the leftists in America that we were fighting a leftist a leftist country. If it had been a king or something else, and Jerry Rubin, who was a who was a radical in America. He said in this, in quoting him, he said, "If there had been no Vietnam War, we would have invented one. If the Vietnam War ends, we find another war." So it's just really fascinating to me that I really firmly believe that the protest against Vietnam, outside of people not wanting to go get killed, were the cause was because we were fighting a communist country. And for all the things that we talk about, My Lai and things that we did that were bad and people that were killed and corruption in the South Vietnamese government, the North Vietnamese killed so many more people. And they still, if you're a Christian in Vietnam, you're still in grave danger. So I just thought that was interesting. So I don't know what you think, but we'll get to the timeline next time. And I hope that you'll, and then we'll talk more about, I'm going to talk about Poland. Poland's really interesting after World War II. So I'll talk about that, but I'm not trying to be scholarly here. I'm not trying to tell you that I have found it all. I'm just finding this stuff on the surface. And I never thought about it this way before until I read about Herbert Marcuse. Like I said before, and one or the other ones, things that I was saying that my generation was saying that we thought was so unique and individual, that was our expression of our the unjustness of the American government and the world that America was in charge of almost. They were coming out of the mouths of other people. We were repeating what we were being indoctrinated with, and that's what's happening today. So just wanted to warn you. So anyhow, I hope you take some of these names and stuff and go dig in yourself and come up with your own opinions. Don't want to agree with me? That's fine. I'm just sharing what I'm learning with you. Thank you.